A federal judge continues to turn the screws into Donald Trump and slow down, if not block, that $10 billion lawsuit he filed against the taxpayers, against the United States government, alleging that in 2019 there was a data breach. By the way, when he was in office, then the data breach in the IRS by this guy named Little John that resulted in 7,500 high net worth people's taxes being leaked or exposed, and that Donald Trump's one of the people who was targeted. So Trump this past January 2026, in his individual capacity, filed a $10 billion lawsuit against the Treasury Department and the IRS, alleging that this caused him grievous injury and emotional distress. And then he tried to pull off a settlement with himself and then went on various media networks and bragged about how, I guess I've already won the case. I'm doing a settlement with myself. Then in the federal court where he filed the lawsuit, he informed the judge, we need 90 additional days to enter into a settlement. So the defendant is agreeing that they don't even want to respond to the lawsuit. They don't want to file a motion to dismiss or actually fight the lawsuit. The defendant actually just needs 90 days to reach a settlement so we can figure this out. And you want to know who the defendant is? Oh, hi, I'm the defendant. It's me, Donald Trump, and I'm settling with you, Donald Trump. Okay. And so that's the dynamic that was at play. And the judge said, wait a minute, are you saying that you're doing a lawsuit where you're the plaintiff and now you're saying you're also the defendant because you're ordering Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent and the IRS acting commissioner to reach settlements with you? And there's already numerous executive orders that say you have final sign off on all final decisions, and these entities aren't independent at all in the first place. So you're doing settlements with yourself right now. And then the judge said, whoa, I'm not going to give you this 90-day extension of time. I'm not going to require that you file like a motion to dismiss yet for the defendants. I need to understand if this is even a case I have jurisdiction over. So as we previously reported on the MeidasTouch network, the federal judge did something called sua sponte on her own initiative. The federal judge said, I need briefing from both parties, not simply the plaintiff, Donald Trump, or the defendant, basically Donald Trump, who wants to give our taxpayer dollars to Donald Trump. We need to hear from both of you separately about the issue of, is there adverseness? Are you against each other? Is this a plaintiff versus defendant, or is it you just doing a case where you want me, the judge, to rubber stamp basically a collusive arrangement? I'm not comfortable doing that. So the judge basically gave a date in a few weeks where she wants Donald Trump as an individual and the government, which Donald Trump has basically taken full control over, and these non-independent entities that should be independent, to brief. But then the judge just did something else that's very, very important, that's not getting enough attention. The judge, her name is Kathleen Williams, she appointed 3 law firms as friends of the court, amicus curiae, to advise her on Donald Trump's suit versus the IRS. She earlier suggested, as I noted, and Josh Gerstein points out over here, that the parties aren't adverse enough to proceed. And so she said, I'm worried about the issue of adverseness and collusion here. I'm not going to rubber stamp giving $10 billion of taxpayer dollars from one side to the other when it's the same side. So I need to understand my role. So pause this. Let's pause for a moment while you explain that to me. But then she did something else. She then brought in these top lawyers from the top firms, Munger Toll, Debevoise and Plimpton, Celindy and Gay, people who are experts and some of the top lawyers in the country. Not just one firm. She did 3 amicus curiae to provide instruction to her. Why not 1? Why not 2? Why 3? Because she wants it to be reflective of a broad cross section of, that's how big it is. $10 billion is a lot of money. And she wants fearless lawyers who can provide independent guidance, because she also knows, Donald Trump's going to be like, this is a judge. Obama appoint the judge, not letting me get my $10 billion. So the judge wants not just briefing from Trump and the Treasury Department, but also she wants the help of these three top law firms to provide her with guidance about, what to do. I'll give you my prediction on where this goes, but I want to get the guidance and advice of a former top federal prosecutor, Harry Litman, who was top federal prosecutor in the Western District of Pennsylvania, one of the top federal prosecutors at Maine Justice in the past. My prediction is that the easiest course of action is just I think it should be dismissed. I think the case should be dismissed totally. I think there's no jurisdiction. There's no adverseness. But I think the kind of middle ground compromise position is you stay the case, you toll the statute of limitations for another 2.5 years until Donald Trump's no longer president. And then you kind of kick the can down the road where there hopefully is an independent DOJ. I guess the worry is that if Donald Trump doesn't leave and does an authoritarian takeover, or somehow JD Vance or someone else, which I don't think is going to happen, what would that lead to? But at least you don't have the issue of Trump on both sides of this case, taking $10 billion of taxpayer dollars. I think the case should be dismissed, but I can envision the judge saying, so the statute of limitations doesn't expire. I'm going to stay this thing and press pause until the end of this term. Then we can redo it. And what's the rush? You didn't file this case. There's probably a statute of limitations issue anyway. Trump filed in January 2026. The incident happened in 2019. But you've waited all these years in general. So what's another 2 years going to do anyway? We have all the evidence. What would be the prejudice of waiting 2 years? This case should absolutely be dismissed. It's frivolous. Let me be clear about my view. It's heinous that it's even brought. But that may be just the solution that the judge chooses. Let me bring in Harry Litman, Talking Fed's YouTube channel, Talking Fed Substack and podcast. Harry, when we're talking about Trump cases, sadly, they're always first impression issues in a bad way because the norms, the traditions, the good faith, the dignity of the office of the presidency, all that gets shattered with this guy. It's unthinkable that another president would sue the government while in office for $10 billion, but Trump's a low-life scumbag, and this is what he does. So what do you make of it all, Harry?
On the one hand, it's an issue of first impression. On the other hand, it's over 200 years old. The first thing I want to note is we're talking about the Constitution and the term in the Constitution that limits the federal court's authority to so-called cases or controversies. That's the very provision that I think Meidas Mighty and Fed heads will be familiar with when there's a standing issue. And when a court finds that a plaintiff doesn't have standing, the court says no case or controversy, dismiss, bye-bye. It's a similar bedrock principle that what's happening is just what's happening here, two people that are really on the same side. I call it jumping the V. If it's a collusive lawsuit, it's not just a good idea not to bring it. It is literally unconstitutional. And what does that mean? It means that the federal courts may take no action. So she's noticing. They thought, maybe we'll sort of push this down the line, enter, I'm sorry, Mr. President, $10 billion, would you take 8 or whatever? But she can't even grant Ben this consent for motion where, of course, they both agree. They always both agree on everything. If she doesn't have jurisdiction, a court lacks power to act. And notice, it's the same damn thing that they did with Mike Flynn. They're talking about perhaps doing it with all the January 6th defendants, these complete fictions of cases where instead of people opposing each other, they're on the same side. And how'd they pull it off with Flynn? They pulled it off by, we'll just go settle and just present that as a fait accompli to the court. But you know what? I've got a long Substack on this that was published Saturday. It's a really important issue because it's cross-cutting. It goes to the thing they're trying to do again and again. And in fact, it's one of the very few principles that you can use to open up a closed case. There's a special rule of federal procedure that says if the court didn't have jurisdiction in the first place, you can re-examine. And just as you say, and as the judge did here, the court can even do it on its own motion. So I think, and you're totally right, we have these powerhouse, John Gleeson, Faith Gay, Don Verrilli, and they're going to make a case. It's really a tricky position for the department, right? Because as you say, there's the law that says I, Donald Trump, lead and you do whatever the hell I say. There's another law out there that used to say you follow the interests of the taxpayers, but of course they ignore that. But more than the law, there's just facts from, up to the highest floor of the fictional ballroom that shows Todd Blanche does anything that Donald Trump wants. And you can prove something is collusive by the facts. The most important case in the Supreme Court was when a dirty landlord was going to be sued. Instead, he paid off one of his tenants to bring the suit, but then he controlled it. And so you had to know the facts. And the court said, case is void from the beginning. So first, she's going to get really strong argument here from the likes of Verrilli and Gleeson. Second, you can't have Todd Blanche and company come in and make some bullshit argument about, we really will be adverse. This time we'll play it right because the law is so strong. The facts are so strong and they're in a real pickle. Are they going to try to deny that basically they are sycophants? And then third, it potentially could, unroll the whole big, plot that they've used again and again with Flynn and others to basically jump the V. In the Flynn case, first, the Biden Justice Department said, are you kidding me? Did what they were supposed to do, motion to dismiss, grant. Flynn comes back after Trump is president, files another case, and they don't even do anything. They just, would you care for $1.25 million from the federal treasury? So all that stuff, and they've done it again and again, could be imperiled by this. And at a minimum, the department is really in a very tight spot. And we should all really closely follow what they're going to try to say. Because how can they really deny that, of course, they do what Donald Trump says? The regs say it that have been passed under him, and the facts say it. And they're in a pickle.
You and I are going to do another take on this that people will be watching this weekend. But, Donald Trump injects himself and his personal capacity as a litigant, which means he should be subject to all of the same rules of discovery. He's no different than anybody now walking in the door. And so, if somebody brought something like this in front of a federal judge, you and I know in federal practice, I've seen a federal judge say, hey, show up in court, plaintiff, and I want to hear from you. Take the witness stand. To which Trump would always be like, I'm too busy, executive power. I can't.
We'll drop it. Yeah,
I can't do. I can't do any of that. And so, you're a litigant. And Harry, what really needs to happen in these cases where Donald Trump is the litigant, and he picks his cases against Rupert Murdoch and media networks where he knows. It's kind of like a Venezuela invasion deal where he kind of, has his Delcy Rodriguez there and they say the things that make it look like they're against him, but they're kind of working together at the end of the day. And it's like even the case against the Wall Street Journal, any litigant in the Journal's position would immediately propound discovery on the guy and set a deposition. And, they don't do that because the handshake agreement is, we're going to file the motion to dismiss. You'll probably lose. You'll appeal it. You'll get your headlines, but we'll just have a little kind of detente. We'll tender it to our carrier and just go through the motions. Right. It's part of doing business with Donald Trump, but it's really an idiotic and dangerous and vexatious world by him. I'll give you the final word.
Yeah, and more than that, they just want to really scoop up money and give it to their friends from the federal judiciary. The main point I wanted to add, Ben, is it's the damn Constitution. If there's no standing, it's a collusive lawsuit. There is no jurisdiction. So your point is well taken, but the judge is going to be in a little bit of a tough spot herself. Because if there's no jurisdiction, she can't stay the case. She can't do anything to the case. The case is just gone and non-existent, even if that means the statute runs and whatever. So the attempt to try to do rough justice here, it's the Constitution. It's not about rough justice. It's about yay or nay. On the other hand, to find that there's jurisdiction here when obviously they're in bed together, that would be, sort of Alice in Wonderland result. I don't see her doing it, but maybe it goes up. I think what's above them, the Fourth Circuit. Anyway, this is going to keep playing out, but it's this one way or another because it's the Constitution.
There you have it, everybody. Everybody hit subscribe here. Let's get to 7 million subscribers. But more importantly, subscribe to the Talking Feds YouTube channel. That's Harry Litman's channel. Help Harry get 1 million subscribers. And also you can subscribe to the Talking Feds podcast and the Talking Feds Substack. Thanks, Harry.
Thanks, Ben.
Want to stay plugged in? Become a subscriber to our Substack at MeidasPlus.com. You'll get daily recaps from Ron Filipkowski, ad-free episodes of our podcast, and more exclusive content only available at MeidasPlus.com.